I call Denise Roche.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to take the first call for the Greens on this, the third reading of this bill. I just want to go back and reinstate the purpose of the bill, and I think everybody's pretty clear about what it is. It's essentially to give effect to an agreement that's been reached between the unions, the home and community support service providers and district health boards to ensure that home support workers are paid for the time travelled between their clients. And I want to remind this House that this came about as a result of negotiations after a case was being taken to the Employment Relations Authority by the PSA, the Public Service Association Union, on behalf of home carers, with Jenny Goodman, home carer Jenny Goodman, fronting that case, and I thank her for her efforts and the efforts of the PSA. Essentially what it was a test case for something like 20-something thousand home carers. And the PSA took this case to say that the travel time between clients was work and it should be paid for, when in most cases that time was not paid for, and essentially the low rates of pay of the home carers would basically be slipping under the minimum wage if you took that time into account. Now, the home carers in this country care for something like 40,000 people who are chronically ill, who are elderly, or people with disabilities, and care for them in their own home. And we must remember that caring for people in their own home is actually incredibly good for those clients. It ensures that they have independence and that they have dignity. But we also need to recognise that caring for them in their own home with an underfunded, underpaid workforce is much cheaper for our health dollars. And why is it cheaper? It's cheaper because it's built on the exploitation of women workers, carers who invest emotionally in their clients and their clients' well-being, but who are also low paid and have limited, if any, guarantee of working hours from one week to the next. So lodging the case with the Employment Relations Authority triggered negotiations, and it triggered the negotiations because travel time is work, certainly in this situation. And like previous cases that, for example, the Service and Food Workers Union, as it was then, or might have been the Service Workers Union as it was then, like previous cases that they've taken, for example, with the disability service carers for sleeping over, that sleepover time was classified as work. And that case, you may remember, resulted in huge back pay claims for, again, what was largely a female-dominated workforce. So in this case, rather than let the Employment Relations Authority make the decision and potentially directing back pay, the Ministry of Health, the DHBs, home care support service providers and the unions, the PSA and E2 and the Council of Trade Unions sat down to negotiate the settlement. And that settlement means that home care support services and DHBs will, DHB home carers, it means that they will not get back pay. And that back pay is estimated to be around $261 million for 6 years, back paying all those workers. And it's likely the deal as it's been negotiated for travel time now is going to cost around about $38 million per year added to the health budget. But, sir, I think it's worth it because you can't rely on the exploitation to provide a service. So this bill will mean that home carers are paid at least the minimum wage for travel time. They'll also be paid a travel allowance of 50 cents a kilometre, at least 50 cents per kilometre, starting in March this year, and going up to 60 cents per kilometre in July. And in exchange for this settlement, no back pay, travel time payment and travel money. In exchange for that, there's Part B, which is not covered by this legislation, and that is the Director General's reference group to be set up, and I'm glad to see that it will be set up, and it is outside of this legislation. And what that Director General reference group is set to do is to work alongside the employers, the DHBs and the unions and the CTU again, and to look at a transition to regularising the workforce, to transitioning to regular working hours for that workforce. They're also to look at safe staffing levels, and they're also going to look at training for carers to level 3, and that qualification can be attained within the first 2 years, because it's not just about the home carers, it's also about the quality of the service that they provide. And essentially, it's also about looking at that those qualifications will be recognised as part of the pay scale. So that's Part B of the settlement. That was the quid pro quo, and I'm glad to see that it is going to happen. I think we have to recognise and thank the unions for taking this proactive approach, for engaging in a conversation looking at the future. So exchanging back pay, compensation for future benefits. And I think that's the difference between lawyers or an industrial relations lawyer who could have taken the case and could have gone for back pay claim. And the difference between that and unions is that they take the sensible, collaborative, collective approach, looking for practical and pragmatic solutions. And I think we need to note that these benefits will be passed on to home carers who are not union members. And it's good that that happens, because otherwise they undercut the ones who are union members. And we should really recognise that in lots of different sectors, that unions negotiate pragmatic deals that benefit their union members, but which are also passed on to others in the sector. So I think also, sir, that there are some limitations about who this bill applies to, that we need to be encouraging new home care support services that are that may be being set up at the moment that aren't listed, to join this, to come under this agreement, because otherwise in the tender process with DHBs, they run the risk of undercutting other providers and forcing wages down. And I have to say, underfunding, and others have mentioned it, underfunding of the aged care sector is an ongoing problem that needs to be resolved, because we cannot continue to provide a service that is essentially based on wages that are too low and services that are provided for free by a largely female workforce. I note, sir, that the next case being taken is Christine Bartlett and the E2 union, the equal pay claim for a rest home worker. And that too is subject to a negotiation by the unions with the ministries to look for a way forward to ensure that we can pass on equal pay, on pay equity to the entire workforce. So that's an ongoing situation, but I really truly do want to see equal pay for our aged care workers within the next couple of years at least. So I look forward to seeing that legislation come before us. And in the meantime, sir, I commend this bill to the House.